find yourself California dreaming about living in Oregon? Well, today we're going to go over 5 differences between San Francisco and Portland living. Stick around for the last reason because I think it's really going to shock you what differentiates our two great cities. If you're watching this right now and you are thinking about making a move to Portland, Oregon, feel free to sign up below for my headhunters list, and it's going to heat seek the perfect property for you in our Portland metro area. I'm licensed in Oregon and Washington, so can help both sides of the Columbia River. And feel free to subscribe down below so you can keep up to date about the Portland, Oregon marketplace. Now, let's get into the San Francisco versus Portland, Oregon. I'm not going to call it a debate because it's not even a debate, it's a conversation. So before we get too far into this, I just want to let you guys know that I think California is an excellent place to live. I actually came from Pacifica in 2001 and I moved to Clackamas, Oregon. I've lived in Vancouver, Washington. I've lived in Southeast Portland. I've lived in Clackamas. I've lived in Milwaukee. I have lived really all over the Portland metro area. But I've also lived in California, so I could say that I'm one of those California transplants. And I've recently just got back from a trip in Salinas Valley, and I've spent time, a month in Dublin, just outside of San Francisco. I've really experienced the California lifestyle, and I know what it means to fall in love with a place. And California will always hold a special place in my heart, as it does a lot of people that move up from San Francisco. I think it's a great place to visit, and I'm going to get into why I think Portland's a great place to live. Now, the number one reason that we're going to go over today of the 5, we're not ranking these, but the first reason is Portland has a more condensed living area. And what I mean by that is that if you see Los Angeles is a better example, though San Francisco is a lot more sprawling and it's a bigger city than Portland. Portland is by no means a small city, but Portland is very contained. If you fly into PDX and you go to downtown, you're going to see a great big bank of green trees, and that is the West Hills and Forest Park that just tower over the city. And you can literally drive 30 minutes from the center of downtown. You can drive 30 or 40 minutes, and in almost every single direction, unless you're cutting through East Portland and Gresham, and even then, it's only going to be about 40 minutes, and you're going to be in farmland, just sprawling. I have been on the outer city limits in areas, like I was living in North Vancouver, and it was farmland just 5 minutes away, cows and everything. And that has got a lot to do with the fact that Oregon zoning specifically, Washington is somewhat similar, but Oregon zoning is very, very high on prioritizing farmland. So you'll see that a lot of the acreage properties just on the urban growth boundary are huge EFU parcels, 50, 100, 1,000 acres, just sitting right on the cusp of the urban growth boundary. Portland has been very, very slow to open up that urban growth boundary, and they really want to make a tight urban network. And you're still seeing that plan from a city planning perspective taking effect today. You'll see them talking more about middle housing than low density, massive acreage homes. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of suburbs that afford the opportunity to find a large lot, and there are still plenty of homes like that. However, I think you're going to see a lot more condos and a lot more smaller lot-sized homes going in the future. Now, that's going to be a future video topic on should you buy old or should you buy new construction, because each have their merits and each have different pros and cons. Now, speaking specifically to this EFU zoning, you will see that Portland just is a lot more walkable and everything is a lot closer in. You could probably drive about 20 or 30 minutes from any one direction and be just about anywhere. And there's a lot of east side neighborhoods that you don't even need to get in the car. You just get on a bike or you walk, or you can even take the Max, which is a really similar echo to a lot of European and Japanese countries and neighborhoods that I visited where you have a little bit more of that walkability. Now, it is still the Wild West to a certain degree. Yes, you still have Mount Hood that's to the east, and you've got the coast, which is rugged and wild, to the west. And so you still have all of those great things. But from a city perspective, where you live, if you land in Portland, Oregon, you're going to see large swaths of farmland before the next big major urban population centers, such as Salem. There is not a whole lot built up between those two areas. You'll see places like Woodburn as like little inlets that are in between, but in between those areas, you're going to see vineyards, you're going to see cows, you're going to see sheep, you're going to see a huge sprawling hazelnuts is another big one. That is a little bit different than in California. My dad actually worked on the BART rail line before he moved up to Portland, and you can see that BART rail system goes a long way out. I mean, if I recall, I took it all the way from Oakland to Dublin, and that was a long stretch where I saw houses, 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 houses. And I know that Los Angeles replicates that city planning vision a lot more, in that you can commute an hour, and that's just like another Tuesday. An hour commute in Portland would really mean that you kind of didn't plan your work and home commute as well as, well, some people will commute an hour in our city, but that's so we're going to get into reason number 2, and that is cost of living. In San Francisco, the average home price is right around $1.2 million, whereas in the Portland metro market, it's $537,200. San Francisco has appreciated about 5.3% year over year, whereas Portland has appreciated 7.7% year over year. The key thing to note about cities like Portland and San Francisco is that the West Coast is still highly desirable, and we're not like those boomtown cities where when COVID hit, everybody fled to the hills, and all of a sudden they woke up one day and realized, you know what, I really didn't want to move to this city after all. There's no industry, there's really not much to do, they're not an exciting or a green or sunny or whatever it is that originally attracted them was more of a fleeting idea. Whereas Portland, despite its problems, and in fact because of its problems, has still appreciated because it's still going to draw crowds. And we just had elections and the DA got voted out who was making terrible choices. I'm just going to be honest here. And so Portland has just kind of remained itself despite what the news said about it. It's remained green. It's remained an amazing place to live. It's remained a place that still has the industry to support the population, to support the housing prices. And San Francisco, fairly similarly, I mean, you've got NVIDIA that just completely took off in the San Francisco Bay Area, and you've got massive companies. And so speaking of stocks and industries, if we're going to have this comparison, I would say that moving or buying a home in San Francisco is like buying Apple stock. It's a great stock. Like, I would not tell somebody not to buy the stock, but it's big. It's been around for quite a while, and it's probably going to continue growing. But you're not really taking you're not really going to see a massive equity growth because you're putting a lot of money into a place that's already kind of risen up amongst one of the top destinations. I mean, San Francisco's a global destination. People go to San Francisco from all around the world. People know San Francisco. Seattle is somewhat similar. I mean, it's like maybe not buying an Apple stock, but it's like buying an Amazon or buying a Starbucks stock. And it's very similar in that it's about 40% more expensive to live in Seattle than Portland. Now, Portland is the little blue chip darling in my mind. You're still get a lot of that appreciation in the Portland home prices, specifically because you are still the cheapest major West Coast city in that entire quarter. So just from a value and equity perspective, yes, there is growth happening all around us, and there are some cities that are bust. I'm not going to name names like Austin or Boise, but I do know people that live there, and they're still attractive places to consider. But I did see a COVID bubble that occurred in those cities. Now they are recovering. Anyways, to get back to the topic, rent in San Francisco averages at $3,930. Now, I find this interesting because I crunched some numbers and I did a mortgage calculator on taking a 10% down payment on the typical average Portland home price. And the mortgage payment actually comes out to $3,900. Taxes, insurance, the mortgage insurance as well. All of those things are actually included in that number. So you could pay for what you average pay for rent in San Francisco. You could take that and pay it in Portland. Whereas based on some rough numbers, the average mortgage price in San Francisco is going to be about $9,300. So the cost is going to be a lot higher. And I always tell people they should make about, give or take, it's just a very general rule of thumb, about 3 times their mortgage payment to not be house poor, or to not wake up at 2 a.m. and say, holy cow, how am I going to pay the bills next month? I just took on another mortgage last year and I had to do that math myself. I'm not, we're all human and we all want to make sure we have happy lives as well as lives that allow us to prosper in the future. So that being said, if your average mortgage in Portland's around $4,000, and this is really rough math, like don't point a gun to my head and say, these are just very napkin math is what we're going to call it. $12,000 a month is a healthy monthly income for the Portland market. The median household income is about $110,000 in Portland. And so we're actually below, just slightly below as a Portland population, what it would take to get into the average house. But yeah, expect to make about $12,000 a month for the average home in Portland if you want to live comfortably. That would be, I'm doing some quick math, about $140,000 a year, which is, big money for some and small money for others, because in San Francisco, you're going to pay a lot more. You're paying $9,300 on an average mortgage, and that's about $30,000 a month. To some people, that is stupid. Like, they would just retire in comment below where you'd retire. There are places you could move to the Philippines. I've heard people move into the Philippines, expats that move to the Philippines, and cost of living there is extremely cheap. But that $9,300 means you've got to be pulling in about $30,000 a month, and you've got to be making about $360,000 a year, which can be supported by the industry in the San Francisco marketplace. There are big dog companies where them paying $250,000 plus a year salary to their employees means that they're going to grow as fast as they already have been. San Francisco attracts a lot of the top minds, and a lot of those top minds are moving out because of work from home. Feel free to watch my video here on working from home, but put it on your playlist to watch later, because we're about to jump into an interview with some local San Franciscans who just recently moved to Portland. The average Portland rent is about $2,000, and so you're paying about double for a mortgage in Portland, whereas you're paying 2.5, nearly triple, to own a home in San Francisco versus renting, which is why I think you see so many renters in San Francisco, because simply it just doesn't pencil out to go in and buy a home unless you're making that $250,000 plus salary, and even then it can be fairly hard. So let's jump on over to our folks that moved from San Francisco to Portland, Oregon, Gabe and Ellen.
Gabe and Ellen, you guys are actually back in San Francisco visiting, and you just bought a home in a duplex in Portland. I think it's incredible because you guys bought right around the average home price in Portland. So in some ways, like, you're purchasing what like the average person should expect in Portland. It's like that affordability, because I mentioned that your rent was around $3,000 in a studio. Was that correct? $3,000 a month for the studio apartment?
Rents have dropped a bit in San Francisco. It really depends on where you are. Like, if you're in the city, you can actually get a pretty decent place for like $25.
Nice.
But rents on the peninsula are significantly higher. So if you were in like Mountain View, Palo Alto, San Jose, Redwood City, you're going to be looking at least $3,000 to $4,000 probably for like a small place. So it really just depends on where you are. But the city has seen a pretty steep drop due to the pandemic. I think it's still recovering to some extent from that hit.
That
It
makes
still is, of course, an expensive place.
It still is an expensive place to live. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think the average mortgage, just doing like the math on a 1.2, I mean, you'd be paying about $8,000 or $9,000 a month in a mortgage payment, and it makes a lot of sense that a majority of the city is currently renting.
Yeah.
So with your experience of going out and purchasing in Portland, you've got about the average Portland mortgage payment. You're really like, I would say you guys embody the cost of living in Portland, if that makes sense. Like you've kind of got the average mortgage of what most people pay. How is the cost of living reflected in all other areas of life? Like, has it been about the same, or has Portland, do you feel like, is a lot cheaper, or how is that compared?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think Portland, there are a lot of things that are cheaper. So obviously, like the median rent costs, the median home price, median mortgage payment, quite a bit lower. So if you want to have sort of that, your space, have a little bit more, value in that area. Definitely going to get better bang for your buck in Portland.
I think the day-to-day too. I mean, there's no sales tax. That makes
the
a
no
noticeable
sales tax
difference.
big deal. That's an immediate 10% on top of everything. The food and dining experience, I think, is probably similar, a little bit less expensive, but without the sales tax, that definitely adds 10 to 15% discount onto drinks and food and dining experiences, shows, art, comedy, all that kind of stuff. I think there's more of it, and there's a lot more, a lot cheaper.
Yeah, there's more affordable options for entertainment and for your day-to-day.
Yeah,
I would say.
Sure.
And then like extracurriculars as well. Just like we went to a couple art shows. Really affordable relative to the Bay. I mean, you could get like a really cool art piece for $20, $30.
Which is probably a little underpriced for art, but
yeah,
there are differences in experience.
Well, so many dreamers come to Portland to, like, there was a lot of people in the 90s that once Seattle had the lights turned off, people were coming down to Portland to do grunge bands, and that's kind of always lived.
Yeah.
Portland is the artistic center of people come here to dream and do their artwork, and you actually see that hipster beatnik culture.
Yes.
Spread all the way out. Like, I have actually seen that wave of Portland actually spread from the core of Portland, and you see a lot of neighborhoods popping out in the far, like, further out east in East Portland, and you see it spread really out into even some of the suburbs have now, like, taken the Portland spirit and almost made it, like, part of who they are. So the cost of living, like, has it been like a substantial, like, has it freed you guys up to do more things, like with, because I mean, I know you guys love to travel, like, has that been like enough of a difference to make you guys feel like, wow, like, how has that difference shaped your, like, what you guys do with your time and money?
Well, I think the most freeing part has been, and we talked about this before, but Portland's like walkability and public transit score and bikeability. So we've downsized on vehicles in Portland, and just that, the not having the insurance, registration, gas payments, that's actually been pretty substantial.
Yeah.
And I think we've enjoyed some more freedom in other areas just from not having that burden.
We still have yet to sell one of my cars. Still holding on to that one, but we did the math, and it's like minimum $200 a month just by biking everywhere. Not to mention you get the health aspects, the joy of biking, and then the time too is almost the same, because we're looking at some places. Biking was 12 minutes, driving was like 9, but by the time you factor in parking, like getting to your car, like that transition time, it's actually longer to drive than it is to bike. So
we're not losing any time.
We've been really kind of blessed with that aspect. Our situation is a little bit unique. We do both, like, I work remote, Ellen has flexibility with her job. We've also decided to, like, we purchased a duplex, so we have renters in there that are covering our mortgage. So we have the most of it. Yeah. So we have flexibility with our time. I think like we decided to make a choice to buy something that was below our means so that we could still have the freedom to go to shows and travel and whatnot. So I don't think that's changed too much. But I think it definitely just gives us a bigger leg up, and now we have more to put aside to investing or saving, and we can still enjoy the same quality of life.
Yeah, nobody wants to wake up at 2 a.m. just feeling like, how am I going to make that next mortgage payment? Or like, man, I feel so house poor. Like, where is that next payment going to come from?
Yeah.
So that's really like what I see is I try to coach like buyers, like a third of your income max should be going towards that mortgage. So I think it's just really cool to see how you guys have actually unlocked your finances to work for you rather than, to work against you. Because some people will their finances work against them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like you just mentioned the walkability, like, is it right that my understanding of San Francisco and more particularly Los Angeles, but San Francisco is pretty sprawling. I mean, you could go an hour and you'd be in like Dublin, which is more of like a suburb, but like it's almost all urban the whole way through, like just tons of suburbs. You need a car is what you'd mentioned.
Well, I think that in the Bay Area, generally, there's a lot of suburban sprawl, and you definitely need a car. I think if you live in San Francisco proper, like in the city, most people who live in the city, or many of them, don't have cars because there's better walkability. But you can end up a little bit confined to just San Francisco if you don't have a car.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very dependent on where you are. I mean, the Bay Area in itself is like over 10 million in population. So it's like 10x the size of the Portland metro area. And I would say, I mean, most of the people live outside of San Francisco. And so if you're in that area, and most people do that because of affordability or because of work or whatever, then you 100% need a car. And then you're going to be sitting in traffic, you're going to be driving to get groceries and go to the movies and whatever. And so like that's a big difference. But if you're in the city itself, the walkability and transit score is pretty good. It's one of the top 3 in the country probably, but it's a small area relative to the Bay. So
yeah, and I mean, Portland, it is nice to have a car to go to Mount Hood or the Gorge or the beach.
Yeah.
Are places outside of Portland to go to that, you're not really going to want to bike there necessarily.
Yeah.
But, so having at least a vehicle is always nice to have.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Just the last thing is the weather. Like, how has you guys have made it through kind of like most of a winter, and now you've seen the spring and into the early summer. How has the weather like been different from the California? I know California.
Temperate climate.
Yeah, very temperate.
The weather has been very, very different. That took me a little bit of getting used to. The summers are amazing in Portland. We've been like with the last couple months when we were up there, and it started turning sunny and green and warm. Really, really cool. And then the bonus too is that in the summer, because of how far north it is, you get longer days by almost 2 hours, which is substantial. So you can really maximize your time outside. You can do stuff, like for outdoor activities, it's a huge plus. I mean, people are really active outside.
I'm walking and skateboarding with the dog at 9 o'clock.
For sure.
And that's on the back end of showing homes until like 8 or 8:30. So it makes those summer hours, not to mention the daylight savings really draws it out extra.
It's very noticeable. The other thing that we noticed was the humidity. So the humidity, temperature wise, if you looked at 2 days that were the same temperature from like a technical perspective, the days the temperature in Portland would feel drastically different depending on like how you were dressed or where you were in the city. Like if you were in shade, versus so in San Francisco, it's a lot drier. And so like when you're in the shade, if you're not bundled up, you will get cold even if it's warm outside. So you kind of learn to wear a jacket to some extent. Whereas Portland, like it's very humid. So if it's hot out, it's hot everywhere. So that was like sort of a bit of a transition for me.
I would like to say I don't think Portland's very humid.
It's not.
I grew up in the South where it actually is very humid. Portland's just a little bit more humid compared to California.
Yeah.
I think you noticed the change.
For me, I noticed it. I'd been in California for 11 years, and so noticing that was definitely noticeable. But
I was gonna say I really appreciate the rain. Actually, I came from a place that was very green and lush, and kind of missed that environment. So I like the wetness of Portland.
The greenery is amazing. So yeah, a lot of.
The rain is if you like books and you like coffee, and I think if you like skylights, like the skylights and rain, I thought skylights really unlock the true potential of living in Portland, because you get the patterning and you get the extra light.
Sure. Yeah.
Pretty necessary, because on the flip side of us having those long, nice summer nights, I mean, winters can end at like 4:30 or 5, especially when it's overcast and cloudy. Like, we can get some pretty early nights that come along.
Yeah. We have yet to experience a full winter, but we did experience over half of it.
Yeah.
And it was doable. It was fine. It's a lot less. I grew up in Michigan, and so it's a lot less harsh. You still get cold and some snow every now and then, but it's more manageable. But it's doable.
It's still a very mild winter and a very nice environment weather-wise.
Yeah. I feel like the snow in Portland happens so rarely that you're almost like Lucy in that Narnia movie where she comes out of the closet and it's like snow. It's like everybody loses their mind when it snows in Portland for a reason. Like, we get a brand new world that we just don't usually see. Do you guys want to show the view really quickly of what's behind you?
Yeah.
Oh man, look at those sprawling San Francisco hills.
So this is the edge of the city, as we call it.
Yeah.
Bernal
One of the
Heights.
best views of the city.
Wow, that's amazing.
You can see the Gate Bridge behind me, I think, somewhere over there.
It's a little hazy.
Over there. And then the Salesforce Tower.
Is that like, that's probably sea fog rolling in? Like, I just see a slight fog.
It's a little
hazy today.
There's a marine inversion
There's a marine inversion layer.
Yeah. It is getting into the June blues, though. June blue.
The fog line usually ends right about like on that side. It's by Golden Gate Park. And lately with climate change, it actually hasn't been as foggy as it normally is. But this is a pretty typical day in the summer.
Well,
but you notice we have jackets on.
I can see why San Francisco still has a big place in your heart. And I mean, like, it's not even like, it's kind of like you travel, and I've been to places like Japan, and I love Japan, and I love all these different areas. Where I call home really comes down to, like, you know, multitude of factors. I think affordability, honestly, like, to have the conversation, I think affordability does affect that. If I'm going to get, you know, maybe not everything, because if I had like I was saying earlier, if I had a couple million sitting in the bank, would I buy a home in California, even as a 3-month vacation property? You know, I wouldn't say no.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was like our big decision, because we wanted to have something and build some equity, and so we decided to pull the trigger on it. But with that being said, we knew that we would be mobile, and so we decided to have some flexibility with having a duplex and whatnot. So
yeah,
we like it.
Best situation for us.
Yeah, gives us flexibility to keep doing what we're doing, and then and I think, like, long term, the older we get, we're gonna want more space. We're gonna want a yard. We're gonna want a yard, or like a place to do projects and whatnot. And I think Portland allows for that. So we were pretty excited to pull the trigger.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Gabe and Ellen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
So there we have 4 reasons. We're about to get to number 5. Before we do, click that like button and subscribe. We just had the walkability, the weather, the sprawling nature, and the affordability all outlined. Now here is number 5. Reason number 5 is drinking water. And this really gets into the whole climate change discussion and what will Portland look like in 30 years? What will the United States look like in 30 or 40 years? You know, when you buy a home, you're kind of making a longer term commitment. And even when you're moving to a city just to live there, you know, it's not cheap to just pack up and move. So Portland's main drinking water comes from the Bull Run supply, which is primarily rainwater. We get an abundance of water already. As you can see, basically all around me, that's downtown Portland. We're on the Selwood Bridge, but we're just surrounded by green because of the amount of rain we get. I'll show the rain levels here for Portland, and then compared to San Francisco's rain levels. Now, look, I don't have a crystal ball. I know people are doing things to change how we consume water, but I will say that the blackout power outages and water outages that California experienced, we don't see that here in Portland. And I think that's a lot due to our natural resources. I also think that Portland in general is a city massively dedicated to being environmentally friendly and making sure that we're living below our means, not taking more than we give, I think is a huge motto you'll hear in Portland. So look, I'm not telling you where things are going to be in 30 years. California has, and I'll actually just say that California has already been in a drought from 2012 to 2019. Water is definitely a scarcity in California in certain regions. The water crisis is already here, so you don't really need to talk about what will happen because it's already happening. I've been in the Mojave Desert, and I know what dry looks like, and I really hope we don't get there. Portland has environmental issues of its own. We do get wildfires, and we do get droughts. We are affected by those things. But I really think that water as a basic need is going to continue to be in high demand. Unfortunately, there's already companies taking advantage of that demand, just like there's companies taking advantage of the demand for homes and so the supply for homes. There's also companies taking advantage of the supply for water. So San Francisco seems to have a fairly healthy water system. I didn't do a ton of research, but from my brief research, it seems like San Francisco's pretty well off. I don't think that can be spoken for most of California. And look, I'm not a water expert. I'm literally drinking this sparkling water, and on the back it says filtered water not from source. So that should tell you how much of an expert I am when it comes to motorcycles. The motorcycles went by. All right, now we're all clear. That should tell you how much of an expert I am when it comes to drinking water. I will tell you that I've had tap water from the East Coast, the Midwest, the West Coast, and Portland drinking water, tap water, is so sweet. It is coming straight from the mountain, straight from Bull Run. And I actually knew the last person, I helped sell his home. He was the last person to ever live on the Bull Run Reservoir.
Bull Run for specific projects. But only a few people have actually resided in the watershed area. The last to be here were 3 headworks operators and their families.
1950 to 1961 is when we lived here. This is where the houses were. Ours was the first one, and all the people here.
He lived there with his family in the 40s, and we helped sell his home in Portland. So he was actually on an OPB special. So just a small tidbit that I've actually been part of the Bull Run history. We used to have water reservoirs on Mount Tabor. That's since been relocated due to some federal laws about how drinking water needs to be handled. I'll just say we still get our water from that fresh supply. And I mean, it's not really like, look how beautiful it is here.
And you saw my clients with San Francisco in the background. Like, no matter where you move to in the Pacific West Coast, you're going to find beauty no matter where you are. Okay, maybe not like, there's parts of Eastern Oregon and like I said, the Mojave Desert that are perhaps not the best place to live. But there are just a ton of beautiful areas to live all over the West Coast. So, like I said, it's not a competition, but if it was, Portland would win. If you guys are looking to tour around Portland, Oregon with me, sign up for my headhunters list down below. I will see you next video, and I will be dropping them on a weekly basis here. So you guys have a good evening, and yeah, subscribe down below. All right, we're wrapping up today's shoot. As you can see, it's getting pretty dark out. I put a lot of time and effort into these videos, and I really, really do enjoy making them. Watch this video next if you haven't already. It's an excellent one.